So I'm going to be talking about wildlife response preparedness building in a changing world. And I want to start with Sea Alarm because we are celebrating 25 years this year. So 25 years of professionalizing oil wildlife response internationally. For those that you don't know us, Sea Alarm is an independent and impartial advisor and facilitator. We are just four professionals working full-time on oil wildlife preparedness and response. We are not hands-on like many of you are, but we connect stakeholders. Good. Okay, thank you. I'll start a little bit again. For professionals, I think it's a bit too loud, but anyway, for professionals working full-time on wildlife response and preparedness. We are not hands-on. Is it working now? Yeah, it went low. Okay, good. Not hands-on, but connecting stakeholders, all sorts of stakeholders for an effective response. So we respond, we analyze, we envision, we innovate, we motivate, we propose, we fund, we manage, we share. And we consider ourselves as an international force multiplier. And I want to stop here to just mention somebody in our team, Hugo Nykamp, which I think has been a key force multiplier for oil wildlife response. And he's not here, he sent his apologies, but I think it was worth mentioning it. So what have been Sea Alarm's main achievements? So 25 years ago, international oil wildlife response was a little bit ad hoc. So Sea Alarm decided to connect industry and authorities so that we could work together. So 20 years ago, and we are also celebrating this year, 20 years of relationship with OSRL, we started working with OSRL, IPICA, ITOP. We also started, after the demand from the industry, analyzing the world, creating our country profiles and registering all the data on our database, not just the information from the countries, but also context to be prepared. We also started working with European Commission, regional agreements, and we started working with industry regarding the needs of the industry to have response on wildlife. So we started leading that joint industry project to get GOWRS going, and GOWRS is what it is now, and it's live. But it was a process. It was, and I'm sure Jenny will be explaining about that in her next presentation. So, in parallel, EOW, and I'm presenting later on that as well. EOW is a network that connects also authorities in Europe. So, both networks, GOWRS, EOW, they share, they work together, they publish good practices. So, 25 years later, I think we've managed to get two very nice and well-prepared self-managed networks. We've got structural connections, and we work globally, regionally, and at national and local level. So how's preparedness in the world? So from our country profiles, we've depicted this big map where you can see lots of red countries, lots of countries that are less prepared with a poor, what we call poor basis on coherent oil wildlife response. Also limited basis. So the question is, how do we get green countries and organizations like EOW or GOWRS to support those countries that are not green? Is that possible? Are they prepared to support our support? So the other question is, how do we turn them green? That's another key question, and I think we have been talking about this during the whole conference. How do we get countries better prepared? So Sea Alarm will continue to provide those corridors to responders so that responders can focus on what matters most, which are the animals. We will keep on getting and trying to get the recognition from industry and authorities. And we will keep learning lessons because we say that if you stop learning, you stop being an expert. So we will keep going on that, innovating and internalizing and sharing knowledge. So what are the key preparedness principles? First of all, keeping up-to-date standards. We've got standards all around. So globally, we've got the two magnificent guidelines from IPICA. They have been developed by experts. We were leading one of them. So they are there, and they are there to be used. But they also connect with regional standards. So we've got the EOW standard series as well. So those both are connected. And of course, we need to make sure that at national and local level, those standards are implemented so that they read to each other and they connect to each other. So keeping up standards up to date at all levels. And that's what the arrow is doing. Then attaching all-weather response to what we called institutional force multipliers. Force multipliers at different levels. We can talk global, regional, or local and national. And we have those levels, and we attach to them through specific industries, authorities, and NGOs. And just as examples, at global level, we have OSRL, IPICA, the shipping industry. Authorities like IMO, IOPC, as NGOs, GAUR, Sea Alarm. So they are all force multipliers, and we go through different levels. So at regional levels, GeoWACAF, and I think Tanya is going to explain to us a bit later on that. Regional seas agreements, NGOs like EOW or Sea Alarm ourselves. And then at local or national level, all countries are starting to be prepared. So they are also force multipliers in their own country. So delivering engagement philosophy. When you have an incident, you might or might not be prepared. You might or might not have resources, but and the scenarios might be challenging, and everything gets into a big pot. So what do we need? We need to engage. We've got, on one hand, an IMS structure that is dealing with the whole overall response. On the other hand, we've got the wildlife branch. And Mike Short was talking this morning about how are they connected? Are they working separately? Are they semi-integrated, or are they integrated? And as Mike was saying, we need to integrate them. So they need to be connected completely. So we've got a whole army of people that need to work together. We've got from volunteers to managers in a wildlife branch, and they all need to work together and understand each other. We have got, in the IMS system, we can have industry or authorities. Again, they also need to be connected to that wildlife branch. So we need those roles that merge and connect each other so that they can work together and coordinate. So the next thing is integrating local or national and tier 3 preparedness. To have a successful response, there are several factors that need to be considered, and these are the different factors that we are depicting in this diagram. But it's key to have those factors at a local or national level preparedness. So that means a lot of effort in planning, in resources, in training and exercises, but it makes a difference. If all of those different sections in that pie are unknown or are not there, it becomes very, very difficult for those tier 3 experts to come and support. There might be many gaps, and there might be many challenges for them to support. So the better you prepared locally and nationally, the better the outcome will be when a tier 3 response organization comes to support you, because then you will know who's coming, what they are doing, what they are supporting. And of course, there will be challenges and things to get fixed, but the basis will be there, and it will be much, much easier and smoother. Design, test, and share meaningful exercises. We have been talking all through this conference that there are no incidents, and we are missing those incidents to learn from. But we have to try to exercise and mimic those real scenarios so that we are more prepared. We have to select the right type of exercises as well. We go from functional exercises to discussion-based exercises. You can make them as big as you want, small and big. But we also have to bear in mind that we have to define clearly what the objectives of those exercises are. You need to think about your audience. You need to think about the skills of that audience and the knowledge that they have. Those exercises can be related to a plan, or maybe you are just exercising to further develop a plan or start a plan. And you can also do exercises to focus on certain things, test things, explore, whatever you want, but exercising is key. And one thing we have learned in the last years is that using visual and engaging and aligning tools are key for those exercises. So get your methodologies out and try to innovate and do new types of exercises so that people get those messages across quite easy. Another key principle is learning from response. as we were saying, less incidents, but we've got decades of responses and we've got lots of lessons learned from those incidents. So it's key to capture those lessons from every incident, regardless if they are small or big. If they have been successful or they have not been successful, they are failures, but from failures we learn and there are lessons learned. And from those lessons you create further development, you can innovate and you can move forward and see what fixes those lessons learned. And one of the things that we wanted to highlight, and it's quite close to us, this incident about Jebel in 2018 in Brussels, is the collaboration. So from there is that you can collaborate, you can integrate your different response organizations. So in that one, in the Netherlands, we had, as Simone was explaining this morning, different rehab centers in the Netherlands that are coordinated by SON Response. They had the incident, they called up upon request for support to Euroa, also Davos partners, and they were all together working and collaborating and working through international standards as well on the same line. So they were all aligned. So we've got challenges ahead. What challenges? A diverse world. So locations, spill can happen anywhere. So and we recognize that, and we saw the lines of the shipping industry, etc. They can happen anywhere. And funny enough, I had 3 pictures there, but I was coming Sunday through with my plane. Well, with my plane. We'll have a plane. No, it's only my so that on the window. I mean, the first picture. I mean, it's here next door, and I don't know where it is, and maybe people from South Africa will know. I think it wasn't South Africa yet, but anyway, I immediately thought, oh, that's the picture for my slide. I mean, how are you on earth going to respond to that location? I mean, you see all the, I mean, there are even 2-3 islands in front of it. Like how? Anyway, locations, very diverse. Cultural aspects. I mean, every country is different culturally, and the culture will condition as well our activities in response. Political circumstances. Not all the countries have the same feeling about wildlife response or environmental policies. So we also need to be aware of that. Every country is different. And biodiversity. How many animals do we have? I mean, it's countless. I mean, it's impossible to assess. Marine animals, but also inland animals, safe and unsafe animals. So we all need to be aware of that, the diversity around the world. And then a fast changing world, that's the other thing. And also been told, that's the wrong thing of having your speak at the end of the conference, that so many things have been already mentioned, but climate change, extreme weather events, rising sea level, energy transition, so Mike Short was also talking about it, versus renewable energies, but also alternative fuels, geopolitical circumstances, new styles of political leadership, national, regional conflicts. How do we deal with that as well? And other aspects like technological aspects, AI, viruses, etc. So what is the future of oil wildlife response? First of all, oil wildlife response resources are lacking. So there are less incidents, so there is less investment into those resources and resources in general. So it's not just for oil wildlife response, so we need to be aware of that. That means less resources also means less experience for us, because we cannot train, we cannot experience, etc. And also big impact for new generations. But oil is not disappearing. I mean, we still have oil for a while, and I think that's a fact. Energy transition is there, but it's slow. So it's moving, and we have to be prepared, but it's slow. So oil is still there. And it's the main propulsion system for most of the existing fleet in the world at the moment. So we still need to be prepared. So how do we cope with that? Lack of resources, lack of investment, but still oil is there. Climate change. So we were saying more extreme weather events, changes in species, habitat changing. So that all impacts our scenarios when we are responding. But that climate change is also forcing to alternative fuels, new infrastructures, new transport routes. Again, a risk that is increasing for us. And then new risks, other HNS products, other viruses. So we have been talking, we had a session on avian influenza, but what else can come? We don't know. So we need to focus wildlife also on those risks and research and development on those risks. So how to keep going? Redefine oiled wildlife response in a changing world. So we all know how to respond to oil, more or less. We are adaptable. We can improvise, of course, depending on the scenarios, depending on the circumstances. But how do we get prepared for the avian influenza? And as we were saying, there was a whole session in this conference on that. So we are already moving, so that's great. But alternative fuels, I don't know. We just had a session as well, one talk, but maybe next EOW, we might have to enlarge that and have more experiences on that. Climate change, other unknown risks, and AI is quite a one that I'm a little bit concerned, but it's moving so fast. How is that going to integrate into wildlife response? Can we, in a few years, just tell AI to or ChatGPT or Copilot, whatever it is, to organize the workflow in a response? We don't know. I mean, it could be. And what about the plans, preparedness plans? How are those going to be coping with AI as well? I mean, we don't know if what we are reading came from AI or not. So we also need to be aware of that and how is that impacting our job. Stay connected and share. So different levels. So we've got a global community, we've got Gowers on top, but they have to be connected with all the different regional communities as well. So Euroa in Europe, but any other regional network that might appear in the rest of the world. So we are not unique in the world. And all these regions also need to be connected to the different countries they belong to. And you can have countries less or more prepared, doesn't matter, but you have to stay connected. And each country as well, they have other resources below them. So all of them need to be connected in sharing good practice and innovation at all levels. It's not moving, Mike. Oh, sorry. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Create and participate in innovative and meaningful exercises in absence of incidents. And be innovative. I mean, exercises, they don't need to be the same. Use new methodologies, new scenarios. Get out of the box, get out of your comfort zone. Try to exercise things like going to different countries. And I know that's difficult because we don't have the resources for it, but different countries, different species, different languages, different stakeholders. So try to exercise with every single option that you have, because that's the oddest option that you will pick. That's the one you will get tomorrow in your incident. So to conclude, there's great progress in our wildlife preparedness and response, and we have to be aware of that. So we are all here, we are moving on. Industry authorities and NGOs have made huge steps forward, but still we need to keep moving. Challenges still exist, and future doesn't look easy, but the oil wildlife response community needs to adapt to what comes ahead, redefine oil wildlife response, keep pushing for further developments and resources, be prepared in absence of incidents, train and exercise. So that's the rule for us at the moment, and work together and share. And that's why we are here with the EOW. We are working together, we are sharing, and we are small, big community, I would say, but I think we have to be together and keep progressing. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Daniela. An amazing talk. Next, we have Deneen Bertel. Deneen holds a BS in biology and marine science from Rutgers University. She traveled as a volunteer to South Africa to support the Treasure oil spill and discovered her passion for wildlife rehabilitation. Deneen then earned her AS in veterinary technology, and in 2007 joined the Tri-State Bird Rescue and Research Team. She remained there until 2018, when she was hired as the readiness coordinator for the Oil Wildlife Care Network, and currently acts as the OWCN Senior Manager of Wildlife Planning. Deneen.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. Good afternoon and good day to everybody online. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Gowers Assessment Team. take you through a journey, really focusing on the development and kind of the readiness that goes behind the Gowers assessment team. So just for those who may not know, we'll start with what is Gowers? So Gowers is an international network of affiliated wildlife emergency response organizations who represent a unified voice for preparedness and response activities. These organizations are spanned throughout the world: North America, South America, Europe, UK, New Zealand, and South Africa. And we've been working together for just over a decade. So I really, like I said, I want to take you on a journey through the assessment team, about the assessment team, and also just kind of the readiness that goes into us being prepared to deploy. So when it comes to the assessment team, yes, we're focusing on that, but we also worry about and we think about all the different response phases. So preparedness, that's really done with the Gower Steering Group. And then we have notification, and that's going to come through OSRL, through the existing SLA. And I promised Frankie I would mention the duty manager, so that's for you, Frankie. And then also activation would be via OSRL or other entity. And then we have the Gowers assessment team. If we should recommend to deploy an operational response, then that would be led by one of the Gowers member organizations. And then there's always the evaluation and after action that we will do to better inform future planning and preparedness. So a little bit about what is a wildlife assessment. So a wildlife assessment is critical during the initial phases of an oil spill to provide insight into the scope and scale of an incident from the wildlife perspective. And that may be different than the overall response. So we're going to focus on the wildlife. Part of this assessment will include an evaluation of immediate wildlife impacts based on factors such as species in the area, at the time of year, concentrations of animals, habitat, terrain, and various other factors. We will also evaluate capacity. So we're going to look at capacity at the local level, the regional level, and we're going to also consider existing response plans, country-specific legal requirements, looking at things like permitting and laws around practicing veterinary medicine, wildlife capture and care, and other factors. The assessment will also indicate if an operational response is feasible and necessary, and we will provide recommendations. So in a nutshell, the assessment team service will provide advice and recommendations on the resources that may be needed and how to source them. And this is going to be based on real-time data that is obtained during this boots on the ground assessment, where we are going to really gather information and then make recommendations. So the best way to do this, the Gowers member organizations have been working together, and they've determined that this 4-person assessment team will be able to cover that ground and provide those recommendations. So that team consists of an ops or planning specialist, a field assessment specialist, a facility and animal care specialist, and a veterinarian or incident-specific specialist. And I just want to kind of emphasize that role a little bit, because it's one of the most valuable roles in this 4-person team, because it really can fill a specific space that complements and supports the other positions. So a little bit about the 4 roles. I'm going to start on the left. So we have the wildlife ops and planning specialist. And this individual works within the client's incident management system, coordinates with the wildlife branch director, and really works to fortify that command structure. They're going to complete necessary reporting, documentation, and also help formulate those recommendations. Moving to the right, the field and capture specialist. This individual will assess the spill site dynamics, looking at local species. Are there experts in the area? What experts might be needed? They're going to look at real-time reconnaissance and also recommend capture, hazing, deterrence techniques, and what might be the requirements to conduct those activities. Moving down to the wildlife rehab facility specialist. So this is really going to look at local capacity. Are there local wildlife care providers? They're going to look at facility options. Are there existing facilities, or might we need to recommend sourcing a remote facility? Also looking at permits, protocols, existing agreements that are already in the area, and then they're going to recommend what resources might be necessary. And then finally, back to the incident-specific specialist, which can also be a veterinarian. And this is tailored to really support the rest of the team. And this individual might bring taxa-specific information. They may have knowledge on the local area, cultural aspects of that area, veterinary resources that might be needed. And they're going to really recommend some of those specific resources around those areas. So a little bit about how we got here. So we know the roles. So the prerequisites in the training, one of the first things that we had to do was really establish baseline prerequisites and what was the training going to look like for this assessment team. So first we'll start with what is the baseline. Baseline is 24 hours of oil and gas industry approved health and safety training. Also working knowledge of the Gowers standard operating procedures. Incident command system or / incident management system training, depending on your locality. Prior documented experience as an oil wildlife response manager or supervisor in a tier 2 or tier 3 incident. Completion of the Gowers assessment team training, which has been created by Gowers. Also the OWRT training, and if you want to learn more about OWRT, they do have a table. I know we don't have much time left. Hopefully you spoke with them already. And then also really outlining required vaccinations and then recommended vaccinations. So these, again, were kind of the baselines that have been established. Then we had to look at criteria. How are we going to look at criteria for the assessment team? So we started with knowledge of skills and abilities and experiential qualifiers. How are we going to qualify these responders? We also had to look at documented oiled wildlife response and leadership experience on tier 2 and tier 3 responses. So what we did was we formed a working group and we really looked at what tier 2, tier 3 responses have individuals been on, and then how are we going to qualify them? How are we going to, so we ended up giving those incident spill complexity scores, and we really looked deep into the incidents, the duration of the incident, where was the incident, how complex was the incident. And then individuals had to qualify by a minimum of 3 responses per those roles. Then we had to look at the individual experience. How are we going to quantify that? So we had the spill complexity score that we talked about, and then we had to look at the individual's roles and how are we going to quantify that information? How long were they there? What role or roles did they play during those responses? Different types of species. So really looking at complexities to help quantify these things. And each position has their own individual criteria for each of the positions, which really helps us with the assessment team selection process. On to preparedness, additional tools for preparedness. I already mentioned training and experience, so that's really, really important. We also have regular meetings internally as a steering group, and also our working groups are working together. Like I said, we are global, so we really have to find time to work together, and planning those meetings is always, it's creative in itself. We have a small window of opportunity. And New Zealand usually ends up getting the short straw of time. Sorry, Louise. Also working regular meetings internally and then also with OSRL to maintain that connectivity. We have a community of practice, and that's really our liaison to industry. And then we have the assessment team training and qualification tracking that you kind of seen a little bit of on the previous slide. How are we going to track and maintain all this information for these individuals? We've also created a RACI matrix, and that really is looking at all the different responsibilities when it comes to mobilization, activation, and how are we and who is responsible for specific things such as determining vaccinations, mobilization procedures, Who's going to create the go bags and what do we need in our go bags? And this really just assigns responsibilities to those specific areas. All right, mobilization. So, like I said, we have an SOP that we follow. And you're looking at this chart. We have a few flow charts like this one. And you might say, well, it's a little more complex than I initially thought. It is. So let me break it down just a little bit. So mobilization, I'm going to talk about notification and activation. So it's going to come via call 8, which is, some of you may be familiar with call 8. So it is a hotline and we will receive a call. The call will go through to the Gowers coordinator from OSRL or another party. And then the Gowers coordinator will obtain the information and they will reach out to the Gowers members via multi-bell. Now, if any of you have experienced multi-bell, it wakes you up. Thank you, Sasha. Once they get all of the critical information, that information will be shared to the Gowers steering group. Again, following the Gowers SOP, we will then work with the coordinator. We'll then convene the strategic meeting. We will meet via Zoom. Again, this won't be in person, and the strategic team will be the one meeting at that point. They will solicit nominations for the assessment team, and then the assessment team will be selected via consensus. So let's go into that just a little bit more. Before that strategic meeting, we will get the critical information on the incident. We will also fill out an individual availability form. And that form is going to really collect information. Are you available? Do you have the vaccinations? Do you speak the primary language in the country? So it's gonna solicit information, which will then go into, it'll all go through the web into a nice spreadsheet for us to be able to look at to help us select assessment team members and also to be able to nominate individuals. We will ask for nominations. Who might be good representatives from the organizations to go on this assessment? From there, the strategic meeting, which I already mentioned, we'll get an incident briefing. We're really going to discuss is this a go or no-go situation? Gowers has pillars and they're looking at safety and feasibility of response. Is there a local team? So we are going to have just a little bit of a discussion and then talk through that. And then at that point, if we decide that we want to continue to move forward, the nominations will be presented. There'll be a nomination round. We'll talk about previous experience. Have you been on a previous assessment team? There will be a discussion round. And then finally, we will make the final selection of that 4-person team. In true response readiness, we will also have a contingency plan. We will also select 4 alternates, just in case somebody may not be able to get a visa to go to that specific country, or they may unexpectedly become unavailable to travel. At that point, we'll select a team lead. So this 4-person team will have a team lead, and then we will begin the mobilization procedures. So the initial deployment, we will follow, like I said, we'll follow the SOP. There will be a pre-deployment briefing. We're going to work to define objectives based on the information that we have. We're going to consult the RACI matrix, which is on the slide here. We're going to look at travel booking, working through OSRL, travel insurance. What are the visa requirements? And not only the visa requirements for where we're going, but also for where individuals are coming from. It's not going to be the same for each of us because we will be coming potentially from different countries going into a specific area. We'll work through the statement of intent, make sure that gets signed, and that we're all in agreement, and then we will prepare for deployment. Each one of the member organizations has a go bag, and then we will also look at vaccinations that the individuals have and what might be needed to go to that specific area. So it is a little complex, and it can be, we really have to look at a lot of factors. So once we get mobilized, initial in-country actions, we're going to have an in-country meet and greet. We will ask for a liaison, and that could be an industry representative, some type of security, or both potentially. We'll have an on-site briefing and really start to gather information, and that will work into an assessment action plan. And then at the end of each day, we'll make sure we create a daily report that looks a little bit like this. So in summary, It has been a journey. It started with the assessment team working group, I believe around 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And what we had to do is we really had to define what were those assessment team positions, the four of which you've just learned about. Then we had to establish those qualifications. What knowledge, skills, and abilities were required? What were going to be the criteria to be on the assessment team? And then we had to collect and analyze the data from all of the individuals within each of the organizations. From there, we had to develop and test the selection process, and we went through this. We did a lot of internal exercises, working through different countries, different incidents, and how are we going to select individuals, and what were these mobilization processes going to look like. And now we have a service that is ready to be tested and deployed. And we really, really encourage exercising, using those exercise days, and really thinking about how this really important part of an incident is vital to moving forward with recommendations for a response, especially in areas where we might not have that preparedness or the capability or capacity. So with that, I want to say thank you to my co-author, Louise Chilvers, and also to Jenny Schleeps and Adam Grogan, who also gave me some insight for this presentation. Thank you to the EOW Program Committee for inviting us to talk about the assessment team, and also to OSRL. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Deneen. Our next presentation is co-led by Daniela and Sasha Regman. Sasha is an expert in wildlife rehabilitation, including oil wildlife rescue and treatment. Sasha has been involved in European programs to professionalize oil wildlife response since 2006. He is a founder of ocean protection organization Project Blue Sea, ongoing since 2000, and he is part of the board of directors. In 2014, he also founded the network organization ProBird EV, of which he is the managing director. He was key in the EU-funded Euroa module project, developing guidelines and technical content for several of the Euroa manuals. He's one of the key experts of the Euroa and the Gowers response teams. So please.
Hello. So, nice to be here. A lot of people here. I'm a little bit nervous, but we will manage that in the end. Okay, so now you have heard a lot of things about the GAWAS, the international network, but we are also having a network within Europe. And I will tell you some more details about this network briefly. So, what is Euroa? So Euroa stands for European Oiled Wildlife Assistance, and it was initiated in 2015. We are having 14 network members in 11 European countries. 11 out of those network members are associated members, and then we have 3 affiliated members. And we are having 2 brand new members, which is KFV from Sweden, and also the Scottish PCA. And within our national networks, so for example, in France and in the Netherlands and in Germany, we have additional 23 organizations under our umbrella. So it's quite a lot of people that are working with us. And we have an equipment stockpile. I will go later back to that issue. Our office is the Sea Alarm, or Secretariat is the Sea Alarm office in Brussels. And yeah, our mission is to support and empower EU authorities and NGOs and polluters in dealing professionally with oiled wildlife using agreed international standards. That's what we have on our flag. So as you see on this, we have been quite busy in Europe in the first decade of this century with a lot of spills and a lot of mystery spills as well. And you see above all those Euroa member organizations have worked on several spills, not all on the same time, on the same spill. But there are 2 spills that have been something like a turning point, I would say, is the Tricolor spill in 2003 in Belgium, we have been overwhelmed with thousands of old birds at one place, and this was the first thing that the first time that we were thinking we need to come together, because it's simply not doable if we leave the Belgians alone with this situation. And after the tricolour spill, we built up a pool of expertise in Europe without any funding. So we spent a lot of money into it to travel to different places to meet together. And that was the first turning point, that we brought expertise together. And the second turning point, I would say, it was the 2009 spill in Norway, the full city. And there you see on the map, CLM was involved, NOAA, the Norwegians, RSPCA, the Belgian people, ProBird, and also some other individuals. And after that spill, we sat together and we said we have to do a group, not just the pool of expertise, but we have to define a project and we have to develop a lot of materials so that we will be prepared better in the future. How is the Europa set up? I think the heart or the point in the middle is our charter that we have developed. So all our partners or the members, they have to agree this charter, and we are also having SOPs and stuff like this that we are guaranteeing an international standard in old wildlife rehabilitation. So what can Europa provide? So we are having, as said, this pool of expertise, bringing people together, and we are having a lot of people after all those years. And with best practice standards, internationally standards, we have a bunch of trainings and also equipment. And now let's go step by step. So let's start with the pool of expertise. And the equipment, our equipment is also stored in Belgium, close to Ostende. And this is 2.5 tons of equipment. We are having 9 pools and filters and everything else what you will need for an old wildlife response, field equipment as well. And we are doing regularly checks with this equipment. It's once in a year we are going to this place and we are checking the equipment. So, as said, we have developed a lot of trainings in the past couple of years, and there are different aspects. So we are having a lot of hands-on response trainings, and it starts with the basic course, which is a 1-day course. And then the second one is an advanced course, which is a 4-day course. And then we have also developed different specialist courses, which are 3 days in the end. So we have now in our portfolio, we are having a field specialist course, we're having a pre-wash course, and now we are developing a post-wash course, which will be there in the beginning of 2026. But also we are having scientific training courses. It's about risk and impact assessment on specialist level. And we are also having these manager courses and Europa-specific team member assessment team trainings. And aside, we have developed a lot of booklets, and we spent a lot of time in that. But with that, I think we are now on the safe place, so that we can also guarantee, and also during the trainings, we can keep the quality very high. So, and with that, I hand over to my dear colleague, Daniela.
Thank you, Sasha. So I'm going to talk about the latest Europa developments. We've been busy the last years. So this is the Europa 2 project that we ran from 2021 to 2022, together with WWF Finland, Submon in Spain, and the NIOS Institute in the Netherlands. Lots done. Lots of deliverables. Few highlights, new website. So we managed to get a new website for Europa. Lots of trainings developed. So risk and impact assessment, managers courses, specialist courses. So we developed 2 specialist courses during that project. Guidelines for exercise development. They are free on the website to download. So if you have need any guidance on how to exercise, go there. And there are lots of examples. The Wildex tabletop exercise that Ira was presenting yesterday as well, that was the origin of that one, was in the EOW 2 project. With the funding from the Commission as well, because obviously I didn't say it, but the EOW 2 was EU funded. We managed to get the network together, which is also key to get together. We did the equipment inspection. We did workshops with authorities, which was key in Europe as well to raise that awareness and keep raising that awareness. We delivered lots of training events from all courses and new developed courses. And we also developed the new Euro branch for sea turtles, which was a breakthrough in the network as well. So we created a basic and an advanced course for Euroa sea turtles together with the protocol. And then EuroWild. So EuroWild is the project that we are running currently, also EU funded through the Erasmus Plus project program. That Erasmus Plus program focuses on education and training in Europe. So the project is run together with WWF Finland, Submon, Wildlife Rehab Center in Ostend, and also ProBird. Again, new training courses developed. So the field specialist course that Sasha was mentioning, the post-wash course is going to be developed. We are having a network meeting next month, yay, in Spain. Train the Trainer course is going to be developed. The online basic course recently finished. Workshops with European authorities again. We think that's key to have in Europe, and the assessment team training. So we are also developing an assessment team manual and course package. And just a few pictures of the specialist course. So that was run last April. The course itself was led by my dear colleague Sasha Probert, together with Richard Thompson from the RSPCA. So we delivered the course last April in Germany, and 14 people got qualified on that course. And then also the basic online responder course. This is just an adaptation of the basic course that we currently, or we've had for a few years, but we have adapted it to have it online. And again, it was a collaborative effort. So Mariluz from Submon in Spain was leading the work package, but all the trainers from the Euroa network were collaborating into that and providing trained videos with lessons on the different units in the course. So we think Euroa is a unique regional solution, and why do we say that? It's a regional network of NGOs with international response capability. They provide mutual assistance for Europe, but also international response support if needed. Each of the organizations, they are their own tier 1 preparedness tool in their country, but they also act as tier 3 because they can support countries nearby in Europe, nearby or not nearby, but they can be supporting other countries as well. And they all get the support from the Euroa Secretariat run by CLM. One of the key things in the network is trust, respect, and collaboration. So we get on really well, we work together, and we move forward as a group. It's an open network membership, so anybody can join, and the aim is to get as many organizations as possible in the coastal countries of Europe. There are no membership fees, so it's self-funded, and as Sasha was saying, it's be a commitment in our own fundings. Whenever we can, we get support from the EU, so we get EU projects and we try to run for them. And the secretariat functions are also run in kind. The network has a coherent vision on professionalism and mutual assistance, so we also have SOPs, internal and external, for authorities in Europe. We've got a standardized training system based on good practice manuals. In that training system, you can follow different training paths, whether it is hands-on training or managerial training. And they go bottom up, as Sasha was saying. You start with your basic qualifications, but you move to advanced, specialists, or managers. And the top levels are only achieved by lifelong learning experience. So that's also key, that we have the top levels with really experts in the field. There are formal qualifications, so the Secretariat keeps a central registration of everybody that has been trained, and there's quality control. And it all works with a train-the-trainer system, so if you get a qualification, you can always train the level below. And this is just a few figures of the numbers that we are dealing with in the Euroa network. So we have trained, or we have in our database, 1,057 responders that have been trained in different countries, and you can see the numbers there. Also, the number of training events. So we've been consistent from 2015 to 2025. Big peak down in 2020 due to COVID, but keeping there in the trainings. And obviously the number of qualifications gained keep increasing. And at the moment we've got 1,469 qualifications provided. What type of training events are we providing? As you can see in the graph, obviously the basic training is the most popular, but we keep going up. So we've also have the advanced, and then you have less and less on the higher qualifications, but that's because people have to go through the whole thing. So we have a continuous and structured preparedness investment. We have a work plan. We have activities to develop as much as we can, I have to say, because as we were saying, the funding is limited, but we try to have that multi-year program of things that we want to achieve. We've got the published guidelines and standards, and we try to update them whenever it's possible. So in the last EOW 2 project, we just did an update, a revamp of all of them. Training and exercise development, we keep training, and we kept developing material for the network. And also the network has different technical committees, and we get together and we discuss and we exercise. So we try to identify as much as we can gaps and needs to move forward and be better prepared. One big thing is that it is recognized, the EOW network is recognized by the EU and the regional agreements. So the European Commission has got the EOW network in their system, in their what they call the Emergency Response Coordination Center. So we are listed as a resource there. And we can be mobilized by different countries via Belgium, because that's where we are registered in, but we can be mobilized to different countries in Europe. And there are also discussions to register EOW as a pool of experts in Europe. So the EOW expert network has been recognized by different regional agreements, the Helsinki Convention, the Bonn Agreement, and the Barcelona Convention, as the expert network for mutual assistance in Europe. Few highlights there. HELCOM, they have an expert group for wildlife response. CLM is chairing that group. And they also have WWF Finland as observer in their meetings together with CLM. The Bonn Agreement, also a big breakthrough last week. They are creating an expert group on wildlife response. So CLM suggested to have the same structure as we had in HELCOM. And last week we heard that Belgium is willing to lead that expert group. So good news for us as well. And then the Barcelona Convention. CLM has got an MOU with REMPEC, and obviously CLM is directly connected to EOW. So whatever country in the REMPEC region under the Barcelona Convention has got a need for support on preparedness and response, EOW or CLM will be there supporting those countries. So national preparedness. In the last years, we've had lots of workshops, trainings, meetings, and webinars with different European countries. And we think most of them have now a clear technical picture of what is available, what your professional wildlife response looks like, how authorities can be developing and implementing that preparedness, and how EOW can be assisting. There are 4 countries in Europe that have got, at the moment, governmental funding and multi-year programs. One is the Netherlands. So Simone was talking all around the Netherlands this morning. Finland also have got a program that allows them to carry on trainings and exercises every year. Estonia, a little bit more intermittent funding, but also doing some activities. And Germany, and Jessica Ram from the Havary Commando was talking about this morning as well. They have done a lot of progress in the last year on preparedness planning, and they are expecting to start an implementation program of that plan in the next years. Other countries making also good progress: Belgium, Poland, Spain, UK. A bit less, but making progress. So what are the challenges ahead? Funding, as always, funding. EU funding is not continuous, so we have to fight every year or every 2-3 years for proposals and putting good proposals, good ideas, and get them accepted. So far, we've been managing, but might not be the case in the next years. Funding also for the network, because we need to stay together. So we need that funding to keep on preparedness, response, etc. But also the different individual organizations need to find fundings at national level so that they are prepared in their own country and for their own country. The other challenge, and I'm not going to repeat that, absence of field experience. So we need to keep going, doing courses, exercises, preparedness, and trying to qualify our responders as much as possible so that when it happens, they are prepared. And then the new generations, of course. So we have to engage with new people that have to learn and understand what the issue is. And it's key also to have them on board from day one, because we all keep moving and the experience is disappearing in a way, but we need to keep teaching the people that are coming behind us. So conclusions. EOW, a unique and well-established professional preparedness and response structure in Europe. The EU funding granted has contributed immensely to create a solid system of standards, training, and accreditation, and also the authority engagement, so that funding has allowed us also to raise that awareness in Europe. EOW is embedded into regional agreements and recognized in an increasing number of countries as the regional own wildlife response solution. So we are there. A regional model worldwide with internationally recognized response structure, integration principles, a solid training system, continuous preparedness efforts, and as many of you guys, conditioned by some well-known limiting factors, funding and field experience. So let's keep on with that and keep pushing to get that funding and field experience. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And lucky last presentation for the conference, Jenny Schleeps. Jenny began working with wildlife in and has specialized in oil wildlife response and rehabilitation since 2008. She's worked with a large range of bird, mammal, and reptile species and specializes in the care of aquatic and pelagic birds. She is the Senior Manager of Wildlife Response Preparedness for Focus Wildlife International and currently serves as the Chair of the Global Oil Wildlife Response System, or GOWRS. In addition to her work with Focus, she is the Publications Manager for the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association and editor for the NWRA Open Access Journal, the Wildlife Rehabilitation Bulletin. Jenny.
Thank you, Mike. I'm very pleased to be able to be in this prized position of the last talk of the conference. It's amazing. So as Mike mentioned, I'm here to talk about GOWRS and the sort of rather vague session title of where we have been and where we are going. But the underlying theme about it is the long arc of international collaboration. For many of us, collaboration is not particularly easily defined, and certainly not so within the realm of oil to wildlife response. It can change over time, and the goals for collaboration can change over time depending on the needs and the individuals involved in that collaborative effort. We often can't define it very well, but we all feel like we know what it is when we see it. And in trying to collaborate together and work together, it can be somewhat difficult to hit what feels like a moving target. I'm going to take you back to some of the early years, before GOWRS was GOWRS, so things that we term as sort of the coalition or as the alliance. And there are some people in this very room, and I'm looking at you, Valeria, in particular, but some other people who were involved in these efforts and have been since 1995, right? So there were a series of meetings that were quite important to these beginning conversations around collaboration, what collaboration could look like, and the need for collaboration. And one of those was a meeting at what I believe is the third EOW conference in 1995 that took place in Seattle, Washington on the west coast of the United States. There was recognition at that time of the need for international response cooperation. And particularly that conversation started with Lynn Frank, who was then the executive director of Tri-State Bird Rescue, Bird Research and Rescue now. But really that conversation between responders about the need for international collaboration and the need to work together. and what the process and purpose could be of that collaboration. That was followed by 2 other meetings that were quite important in the year 2000. The first being a meeting that was held at RSPCA. It was just called the International Oiled Bird Meeting. It took place in Sussex in England. And that was followed by the International Oil Spill Conference in Tampa, right in Myrtle Beach in Florida, in the southeast of the US. And those really developed into these very broad conversations around coalition of responders. And again, this focus on how we can share the load, how we can come together in these large events. Year 2000, of course, is familiar to all of us because we're also here discussing the 25th anniversary of the Treasure oil spill. So along with this conversation that was ongoing around international collaboration was also within that time frame, the Treasure oil spill happening. Beginning in 2000, there was sort of an informal, functional group of people working as the Alliance. So they were working on bylaws, protocols for animal care, protocols for response, and animal care standards, really looking at things that would professionalize the field, even though it was not a formally incorporated organization at that point. In 2003, there was, again, you can see these 3-year gaps that are always around the conference cycles, either EOW or International Oil Spill Conference. So this is when we get together, and this is another reminder of how critically important these meetings are to all of us to move things forward and to professionalize this field as much as we can. So in 2003, there were again the International Oil Spill Conference in Vancouver, British Columbia on the west coast of Canada, and the Effects of Oil on Wildlife Conference in Hamburg, Germany. It was at the Hamburg meeting that bylaws were developed and the International Alliance of Oiled Wildlife Responders was really born. One thing holds true from the beginning of those conversations in '95 to today is that Gowers is terrible at acronyms. That's how we came up with, in the early days, the IAOWR and now the GOWRS. So we have not learned our lesson from that one. But in 2005, the Alliance, as it is sort of shorthand known, was officially incorporated as this new fledgling organization. So in those early years, starting in 2006, you can see these are part of the, these next 2 slides I'm going to show you are the written purposes and the objectives of the organization. So focus on high standards of practice, high standards for ethics and conduct, professionalization of the field, dissemination of knowledge, particularly through publications and symposia, and looking at cooperation, professionalism, and working with governmental agencies, industry, and the scientific community. So things that Gowers as an entity is still involved in today. The objectives, as it was written here, and these are directly from the bylaws that Mike luckily shared with me, develop and maintain guidelines for best practices in oiled wildlife response. That's something that Gowers has also worked on. Expanding communication among oiled wildlife responders, industry, government, and the scientific community. Again, looking at best practices in oiled wildlife care, looking at research and development. Provide a unified voice for oiled wildlife responders. That particular sentence is still in the mission statement and the collaboration agreement of Gowers, right? That is held true from that initial conversation in 1995 through to now. Along with these other objectives were strategies to limit damage to wildlife, again, international preparedness, still very much the focus of what we do, and human health and safety. Those early years were a little unstable, as they are for all young organizations. So 2006 and 2007, they started working on this really very large board structure, something that looked a little bit more like the way that we see typical nonprofit boards formed. So there was a broad group of international responders, and the focus of the organization was really on membership and developing different types of membership, both for individuals and for organizations, bringing members into the organization, having symposia, working on publications, and a real integrative approach to collaboration. Unfortunately, there was a lack of funding, as so often happens with these collaborative efforts and nonprofit organizations. And that led to the dissolution of the Alliance in 2009. So there were, unfortunately, things did not happen in the way that we had hoped. So what happens next, right? We move in these collaborative efforts, and then these sort of, you run into a wall or get taken out by an eagle as it happens. So what are your next options? Again, 3 years later, there was a pretty critical meeting that happened at Interspill in 2012 in London. It was a series of industry partners and OSRL that met with responders, including Sea Alarm Foundation, the World Wildlife Care Network, SANCOB, International Bird Rescue, and the RSPCA. And during that meeting, it was sort of a key milestone where there was a discussion about, again, the need for this collaborative effort. So there were terms of reference and a proposal that were developed in 2013 and submitted to this joint industry project. The project was funded in 2013 and then fully approved in what's known as the JIP 20 within 2015. That became known as the Gowers Project. So at the time, we were not formalized, we were not incorporated. It was simply the beginning of the Gowers Project. So the Gowers Project had a period of about 5 or 6 years where we were really focused on a couple of specific things. In phase 1 of this JIP-funded project was really looking at creating an international framework for Tier 3 oiled wildlife response. So again, this focus on standards, procedures, government arrangements, readiness systems, a way that we could ensure that we had something that would function for both industry and for response partners, right? So it had to meet the needs of both communities in order to be functional in an international Tier 3 framework. There is a second piece, so that the first phase of that project was from 2015 to 2016. The second phase was from 2017 to 2021. So it covered the period we all forget, which is when COVID hit to when it sort of didn't leave us, but those years between 2020 and 2023 that nobody can make sense of, including me. There were 2 other sets of goals within this project that were really looked at to be an industry piece that was supposed to be achieved by industry and the stakeholders. And those were really around support and planning and preparedness for Tier 1 and Tier 2 responders. So in-country planning to define the limits and the capabilities of Tier 1 and Tier 2 resources, and then preparedness to ensure that any response could be scaled appropriately. Along with training and exercises to test that ability and to really look at preparedness as a whole. The other piece that was industry-led was the promotion of good practice, right? And this was done with industry in a collaborative way, but raising awareness among all stakeholders and ensuring integration of new and existing oil spill plans and activities. Okay, there were some specific outputs or deliverables that happened during that period, and many of you are familiar, I think, with the IPCA guide. Daniela had it in her slides, as did Sasha. So there were 2 IPCA good practice guides that were put out, one on preparedness, wildlife response preparedness, and the second one, which is a set of internationally agreed upon animal care standards called the Key Principles for the Protection and Care of Animals in Wildlife Response, World Wildlife Response. That was a very significant milestone for the Gowers Project as a whole, and took a great deal of work for us to pull together, because even now, but specifically at that time, you're really looking at 10 organizations coming together with their own sets of protocols, understanding regional specific things that have to determine really what the best standard is for everybody that can be used globally. That is a very difficult project, and one that was worked at really hard within this period. Also between 2015 and 2021, there were a series of wildlife branch competencies that were defined around the functions of the role, the response roles. Recommendations were made for Tier 3 equipment stockpiles. what should be brought into the stockpile, how many days that might hold for if it was for the first 48 or 24 hours of response. So it's really critical to have this piece of aligned information around wildlife branch response, equipment that would support the directives and support or the objectives from the wildlife branch, and equipment that could support those first 48 hours of response. And then there were additionally guidance materials for industry. And again, all of this was focused on a framework for oiled wildlife response that would meet the requirements of both the wildlife responders and industry. Also in that time were some specific industry-aligned projects. So there were a number of industry exercises, including one in Malaysia in 2016. There was a meeting in Cyprus, which many of you are familiar with, so a workshop meeting in 2019, where there was the development, in large part from Hugo Nijkamp from Sea Alarm Foundation, for the preparedness wheel. So this is a wheel that sort of looks at planning into training and exercising to keep everybody sort of focused on moving forward. And then there was the initiation of the Wildlife Preparedness and Response Community of Practice, which is a community of practice under Oil Spill Response Limited. And the purpose of that community of practice really is to support and drive the implementation of tiered preparedness and to improve collaboration across the industry as a whole, as well as support effective integration of wildlife response expertise. So now we're in 2022, and Gowers is in a slightly different period. During this period, we signed a contract, a best effort contract with OSRL for a service level agreement for an assessment team. And Deneen did an excellent job of describing the assessment team function and the roles within the assessment team and its purpose. So I won't go into that too much, but I will just talk about it a little bit. So that assessment team has a specific purpose and a specific duration under the service level contract. So it is a team of 4 individuals that are highly qualified within oiled wildlife response and within the assessment phase that are ready to deploy at any time, 24/7. To assess the on-the-ground conditions. So really looking at what wildlife has been impacted, what is the risk to wildlife, what are the potential strategies, what are the opportunities for capture or deterrence and hazing, all of these pieces that feed into the response mechanism as a whole so that you understand the resources and the capability that you need to have to properly respond to it. So that functionality within the assessment team really is to evaluate the need and the feasibility of a Tier 3 response once Tier 1 and 2 capabilities have been exceeded, and then to work with the client to make sure that those can happen practically. So Deneen showed you this graphic, but these are again the 4 baseline positions: the wildlife ops and planning specialist, the field capture specialist, the veterinarian or incident specific specialist, and the rehabilitation and facility specialist. So we work together as a team to underscore the best efforts for the response. When we were looking in some sort of understanding of how we could move the assessment team forward, we looked at criteria, and Deneen talked about this a little bit. Deneen and I were both on the assessment team working group in developing this, and one of the key pieces about the assessment team was that there was a requirement for us to have quantitative criteria, not qualitative. So somebody couldn't just say they were qualified. We wanted to ensure that they had documented qualifications, right? So a couple of things that we looked at is how complex was the incident that they responded to, how many incidents did people respond to, whether there was a requirement for the number of Tier 2 or Tier 3 incident responses. How long were they in those roles, in those leadership positions? And then there were some baseline criteria. And then a whole lot of need for a bunch of math that came out and gave us a number that said, congratulations, you've met that criteria. Sasha Regman, as our expert in exercises, then pulls together with the exercise working group these teams that tell us and test the assessment team in a variety of really complex scenarios and situations to ensure that we're prepared. So within those exercises, we really work collaboratively with local tier 1 and tier 2 entities, local authorities, and other stakeholders to ensure that we have a global framework for the exercises and the tests that we run on our assessment team. We want as much experience in working with different people in collaboration across those boundaries to ensure that we really have a very well exercised assessment team. So in 2024, in February of 2024, Gowers was incorporated as an entity. So what does that mean for us in 2025 and beyond? There's a real focus for us on industry exercises and full incorporation of wildlife response into overall response objectives and operations. That's really critical, as Daniela mentioned. Exercises are a critical part of preparedness and are really necessary for us to move forward. We are continuing to work on preparedness activities for Tier 3 assessment and response, and continuing to really look at ways that we can collaborate with authorities, NGOs, related disciplines, and oiled wildlife response as a whole, and solidifying that collaboration both internally within Gowers as well as across all the boundaries. Collaboration is really key to everything that we do within oiled wildlife response. Organizations are much stronger when we work together than we are individually, and response is more effective when we work together. At the keynote, Anton Wolfart had a series of quotes, and I thought, being that this is the last talk of the day, that I would leave you with two of my favorites, and one is here. And I keep both of these on the window right where I work so I can look at them. One of them is by a woman named Miriam Kaba, who is a Chicago community organizer and abolitionist. And her constant reminder is that hope is a discipline. You have to choose every day for hope. And the other one I keep is this one by Grace Paley, which is the only recognizable feature of hope is action. And so I leave that now with you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jenny. A perfect way to end the spoken presentations. There is a panel afterwards, though. So, okay. If I can invite the speakers to come up back to the podium so they can answer questions and the camera can see you. Yes, we haven't done that in other sessions, but I'm in charge of this one, so I'm going to make you. While I get the handheld microphones going, I'd ask Frankie if there's any questions from the online audience.
Yes, so there is a question from online.
I'm up to answer.
The first question is, how can oiled wildlife responders integrate with OSRL oil spill responders? Is Gowers part of the 5x5? How do wildlife responders integrate with OSRL's oil spill responders? I feel like this may be a question for myself. So, for those that don't know, OSRL has a 5x5 service, which is 5 responders free for 5 days. And life responders from Gowers and CLM are not part of that. We are integrating.
Here, I will take this. You take this. Yeah, you get that light.
So that's the answer. So they're not part of the 5x5, but we work very closely together to integrate wildlife response.
Yeah. Now I give that back to you.
Anybody else have a question while I try to fix the chat feature on Zoom at the same time? Other questions?
Frankie. This isn't a question for Frankie, I don't think, but standards that Gowers hasn't been recognized yet, but I understand you've done lots of practices. So what does that time frame look from having an instant notification, selecting your assessment team with your quantitative method, and mobilizing? So that's either boots on the ground or I don't know, confirming airplane tickets or something like that? Has that looked like?
So the strategic team for Gowers is required to meet within 2 hours of notification. So we have 2 hours after notification to come together. And then within an hour of that strategic team, our goal is to make a decision about the most fit for purpose assessment team, right? So what members have the highest skill levels for where we're going, the species matrix, all of those sorts of events. The actual mobilization piece depends on whether we are given the go-ahead for mobilization, when the tickets are purposed. So we go through the duty manager at OSRL, and we go through their excellent Crisis 24 service to ensure that we can get tickets, get mobilized, get visas. So a lot of it depends on how quickly we can get on a plane. It's less related in some cases to our ability to get on a flight as to when the flights fly, where we're flying to. So potentially it could be 24 hours. It could be sooner, right? So one of the things that goes into it, did mention this in her presentation, is that incident specific specialist is often somebody who is in a country who speaks the language and has some existing relationship with tier 1 and tier 2. So that allows them to go on site quite rapidly. Janine, if you have anything to add to that, or did that cover your? Yes.
Frankie? Go ahead, Frankie.
I just want to add on to something that Jenny mentioned there. In a recent exercise, we simulated mobilizing Gowers and Sea Alarm to Brazil, and from not notification, but mobilization, once the client had said, yes, let's go, into country, it was 3 days, and sorry, it was actually to Guyana.
Okay, other questions from the audience? Other questions online?
How do international wildlife experts work with local NGOs during a spill?
A very small question.
Why am I chair of Gowers at this particular moment? I think there are a number of ways that Gowers in particular, and I think CLM has a role there in terms of their relationship building. Certainly for us going in as the assessment team, if you're looking specifically at that, looking at local on the ground NGOs as partners in the response, who can provide us with information, data that we don't have, understand the greater context of the spill. That's certainly, I think, the first thing that we think of when we're looking at other NGOs. Do you want to?
Okay, and I think we may make this the last question because.
I'll just extend a little bit.
Sorry, did not see you there.
I think it's key as well to know if we are talking response or preparedness. So I think one of the key things is partnering with those small NGOs in preparedness time, in peacetime, so that we can work together a little bit better and more efficiently when response is on. But support is what we provide both. I mean, and Gowers doing their assessment moments, their assessment trip, being there with those organizations, Sea Alarm trying to support them as well in managing things that they might be doing. So collaborative effort, support and assistance.
Yeah, it's not a question. It just kind of adding to Jenny comment on how Gowers interacts with NGOs. And I will talk from an example from recent exercise that ExxonMobil did. And we did exercise Gowers mobilization, had 4 Gowers members guys on the exercise, and even going to the remote areas to assess the area. And this is a responsible party or entity kind of responsibility to make sure that they get the network of local NGOs, additional to whatever Gowers has their existing network, but on the ground have these networks and facilitate the connection between Gowers and NGOs, as what happened at that time.
Great, thanks, Tony. With that, I think I'm going to close this session. Please give a final round